Good evening, my audience. Today we are going to talk about the functional brain anatomy. And this slide demonstrates the lobes of the brain and major divisions to talk about. Anteriorly, we have this large blue-colored frontal lobe. Posterior to it is the parietal lobe, and the most posterior part is occupied by the occipital lobe, superiorly and inferiorly the cerebellum. This large area of the brain is occupied by the temporal lobes, which is the most inferior and medial aspect of the brain. And this is the brain stem, which communicates the brain to the spinal cord. We'll start with the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is the area of brain responsible for higher cognitive functions, which includes problem solving, spontaneity, memory, language, motivation, judgment, impulse control, and social and sexual behavior. The temporal lobe plays major role in emotions and is also responsible for smelling, tasting, perception, memory, understanding the music, aggressiveness, and sexual behavior. Also, it contains the language area of the brain. The parietal lobe plays a role in our sensations of touch, smell, and taste. It also processes sensory and spatial awareness and is a key component of eye-hand coordination and arm movement. The parietal lobe also contains a specialized area called vernix area that is responsible for matching between written words and the sound of spoken, which is the speech. Occipital lobe is known to control the vision and recognition. Limbic lobe is located deep in the brain and makes up the limbic system, which will come in the next slide. This is the limbic system, area of brain that regulates emotions and memory. It directly connects the lower and higher brain functions. It is consistent of the cingulate gyrus and the fornix, anterior thalamic nuclei, hypothalamus, amygdaloid nucleus, and the hippocampus. Cerebellum, this large part which occupies the posterior fossa, is connected anteriorly to the brain stem and is the center of body movement and balance. The thalamus means the inner room in Greek, and it sits deep in the brain at the top of the brain stem. The thalamus is called the gateway to the cerebellar cortex, as nearly all sensory inputs pass through it to the higher level of the brain. It is a major sensory recepting organ of the brain. This is the hypothalamus area, which sits under the thalamus at the top of the brain stem. Although hypothalamus is small, it controls many critical body functions: the autonomic nervous system, the emotional response and behavior, body temperature regulation, food intake, water balance and thirst, and controls sleep, wake cycles, and endocrine most functions. It is shaded here in blue, and the pituitary gland extends from the hypothalamus. The medulla oblongata bears seamlessly with the spinal cord and creates the base of the brainstem, with on top of it sit the pons. The medulla is primarily control center for vital involuntary reflexes such as swallowing, vomiting, sneezing, coughing, and regulation of cardiovascular and respiratory activity. The medulla also shares in the origin of many cranial nerves. This is the pons. The pons is rounded in structure between the midbrain and medulla oblongata. It represents the meaning of bridge in Latin. The main function of the pons is to connect the cerebellum to the rest of the brain and to modify respiratory output of the medulla. Also, the pons share in the origin of several cranial nerves, as we see later. The ventricles is a major constituent of the brain. It is located in the central part. Complex series of spaces, tunnels through the center of brain. It contains the cerebrospinal fluid, which suspends the brain and skull. It plays a role as a chemical messenger widely distributed through the central nervous system. The content of the ventricle is the cerebrospinal fluid. It is a colorless fluid that passes the brain and spine. It forms within the ventricles and circulates through the nervous system. The brainstem structure is this basal brainstem structure, and it controls the basic function like breathing, heart rate, swallowing, reflexes, sight, sounds, and sweating, blood pressure, sleep, and balance. It is composed of the medulla oblongata, the pons, and the midbrain. These are the divisions of the brainstem. The higher part is the midbrain, this is the pons, and this is the medulla oblongata. The cranial nerves are olfactory nerve, optic nerve, oculomotor nerve, the third. Fourth is trochlear, fifth is the trigeminal, abducent is the sixth, facial nerve is the seventh, vestibulocochlear is the eighth, glossopharyngeal is the ninth, vagus is the 10th, accessory nerve is the 11th, and hypoglossal nerve is the 12th cranial nerve. These are the basic origins from the medulla oblongata higher surface and the margin of the pons. Now we come to the brain functions, and which includes the majorly functions of vision, taste, cognition, emotion, speech, language, hearing, motor function, sensory function, and autonomic functions. These are the well-known major brain functions that the brain is controlling them. Start with vision. The visual cortex resides in the occipital lobe. Sensory impulses travels from the eye via the optic nerve to the visual cortex. Of course, damage to the visual cortex results in blindness. This is the area responsible for the visual control. Taste is a complex which is outlined by the green circle in the part of the sensory cortex, inferiorly, responsible for taste, as we see in this diagram, in the parietal lobe. Cognition is major function of the frontal lobe, and particularly the prefrontal lobe. Cortex is involved with intellect, complex learning and personality, and injury will result in mental and personality abnormalities. Emotion is the shared function between the frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex, and the limbic system. Speech is controlled by the Broca's area, where formulation of speech and area of brain sends motor instructions to the motor cortex, which is taking the responsibility of this area. Injury to Broca's area results in difficulty in speaking. Language, there are two parts here. Vernix area is the specialized portion of the parietal lobe that recognize and understand written and spoken language. Vernix area surrounds the auditory association area. This is the auditory association area, and this is the vernix area which surrounds it. Damage to this part of the brain can result in hearing problems, loss of the someone hearing speech, not understanding it. Hearing per se is a divided function between two areas. The primary auditory area, the brown circle, detects sounds that are transmitted from the ear in the sensory cortex, and the auditory association area, the purple circle, is a part of the brain that is used to recognize the sound of the speech, what is music, noise, etc. The motor cortex is very important for every radiologist and radiographer to recognize. The motor portion of the cerebrum is illustrated here and is two parts. The premotor cortex, responsible for repetitive motions of learned motor skills, and the dark red is the primary motor area, responsible for the control of the skeletal muscles. Two parts, which is the premotor and primary motor. This is the sensory cortex, posterior to the motor cortex. Different areas are associated with different parts of the body. Injury will make sensory disturbance in the associated part of the body. Finally, the autonomic functions. The brainstem controls the basic functions of life, as we said, breathing, swallowing, control of heart and hypertension, blood pressure. The pons plays a critical role in respiration. The medulla is responsible for respiration and cardiovascular function. Injury or any pathology that would affect these areas is highly criticalized for the patient major life-saving functions. Thank you for listening, and hopeful to see you in another talk soon.